What if I told you that the most productive food source on your property isn't a towering apple tree or a massive pecan, but a humble bush you could plant against your back fence this weekend? Most people don't know this, but ancient civilizations and even early American settlers didn't rely on massive orchards for their survival calories. They relied on dense, prolific, often overlooked shrubs that modern gardeners have largely forgotten. In fact, stick around because number 13 on this list was so calorie-dense and vital that it was literally used as a form of currency and buried with kings. And number 3 is a complete protein source that produces for decades and was considered a sacred longevity fruit in ancient monasteries. I've put together a definitive list of 15 tiny plants, shrubs, and bushes that will absolutely outproduce a standard fruit tree in terms of speed, nutrition, and raw caloric density. Make sure you subscribe and ring the bell right now, because we're uncovering the genuine, scientifically backed ancient food truths that modern grocery stores don't want you to remember every single week. Here are 15 tiny plants, ranked from a fast soil-building survivor to the absolute undisputed calorie king of the ancient world. Number 15, Goumyberry, the soul-building healer. Before we even talk about the fruit, you need to understand the genius of this plant from a scriptural and scientific perspective. While modern agriculture strips the ground of life, requiring heavy synthetic fertilizers that burn the microbial networks and leave a dead, salty crust behind, the Creator designed a plant that literally feeds the earth around it. In Leviticus, we read about the concept of letting the land rest and restore itself, a principle that the Goumyberry, Elaeagnus multiflora, performs automatically. It has a symbiotic relationship with Frankia bacteria in its roots, allowing it to pull nitrogen from the air and fix it into the soil in a form that neighboring plants can immediately absorb. Think of it as a sclerolis, natural fertilizer factory disguised as a beautiful silvery green bush that shimmers in the afternoon light. Modern science has caught up and recognizes this as a keystone permaculture species. But ancient Asian farmers knew it for centuries as a nurse plant, the guardian of the orchard floor. Here's the traditional use. You don't just plant it for the harvest. You plant it right next to your heavy-feeding fruit trees, your apples and your pears, tucking it into the understory where it catches the dappled light. The Goumi bush enriches the soil, and in return, it throws out a massive crop of bright red, speckled berries that look like tiny jewels with silver flecks on their skin. A mature bush will give you 8 to 15 pounds of fruit every single year. And the taste is a shocking tart sweet punch, like a sour cherry crossed with a red currant, with a slight astringency that makes your mouth water. It ripens in early summer, often in late June or early July, but the real magic is in the compound profile. These berries are packed with lycopene, the same powerful compound found in tomatoes, but in a form that's surprisingly bioavailable. Clinical research has highlighted lycopene's role in reducing oxidative stress and inflammation, particularly in cardiovascular health. The fruit also contains high levels of flavonoids and vitamin C. While modern medicine tries to isolate these compounds into pills, the Goumyberry offers the perfectly balanced whole food package. It was abandoned by the West simply because it's too soft to ship. The skin is fragile, almost translucent when ripe, which makes it a commercial nightmare but a backyard treasure. When you hold a handful, still warm from the morning sun, you're holding a nutritional supplement and a soil regenerator, a genuine gift that asks for almost nothing in return. Think of it as a living irrigation system for the soil itself, quietly pumping nitrogen into the root zone of everything around it, asking only that you come and pick its fruit. Number 14, Nanking cherry, the speed demon of the orchard. If patience is a virtue, sometimes the body needs a reward a little faster. Most fruit trees mock you with their timeline, promising apples in 7 years or pecans in 15. You plant them with hope, and then you wait, watching the trunk thicken at a pace that feels geological. But look at the Nanking cherry, Prunus tomentosa. This is a bush that operates on a different clock entirely. Unlike the towering, slow giants of the orchard, this shrub starts throwing out food when it's barely out of its infancy. We're talking about significant yields in just 2 to 3 years. I've seen bushes no taller than my knee covered in blossoms, and by year 3, the branches were bending under the weight of the fruit. This isn't a modern hybrid trick. This is a resilient native of the harsh Asian steppes, designed to reproduce quickly before a hard winter or a drought could wipe it out. It has a deep genetic memory of urgency. The biblical wisdom here is in the preparedness. The story of Joseph in Egypt was about storing food in the years of plenty for the years of famine. If you needed a calorie emergency fund, the Nanking cherry is it. A single mature bush explodes with life, producing 10 to 20 pounds of cherries annually. The catch is that the harvest window is tight, about 2 weeks of glorious, sheer abundance. The entire bush turns a brilliant, bright red, covered in small, sweet tart cherries that you can strip off the stems by the handful. The flavor is bright and clean, with a hint of almond from the pit. Now, modern science looks at these cherries and sees a powerhouse of anthocyanins, those deep red pigments that are neuroprotective and anti-inflammatory. But the modern food system ignores them because they don't have a long shelf life. You can't gas them, truck them across the country, and let them sit in a warehouse for a month. They demand to be picked and eaten, or dried, or turned into juice immediately. The traditional use was to spread a sheet under the bush, shake the branches, and catch the ripe fruit as it fell, then dry the surplus on racks in the sun. Think of it as nature's emergency flash harvest, a bush that understands urgency. It demands you stop what you're doing, gather the blessing, and preserve it. It's a tangible reminder that sometimes the most powerful things in life are the most fleeting, and you have to be present enough to catch them. Number 13, hazelnut, the liquid gold of the ancient world. This is where we move from quick sugars to dense, life-sustaining fat and protein. When we read about the patriarchs moving through the land, trading goods, and storing wealth, we often think of gold, silver, or spices. But in the ancient world, calorie-dense shelf-stable energy was the truest form of currency. And the hazelnut bush, Corylus americana or its European cousins, was the bank. This isn't a massive tree that requires a cathedral of space. It's a multi-stemmed bush that you can weave into a hedgerow. Its stems growing in a graceful fountain shape. Yet it produces a food so complete that it could sustain you through a siege. A pound of hazelnuts delivers roughly 2,800 calories. That's more than a pound of pure cane sugar. It's a concentrated ball of fuel, wrapped in a thin, papery husk that peels back to reveal a smooth, round kernel. Here is where modern science bows its head in reverence. We've isolated the fats in hazelnuts and found that they are rich in monounsaturated fatty acids, specifically oleic acid, the same heart-protective fat that makes olive oil famous. We've found high levels of vitamin E, a fat-soluble antioxidant that protects your cell membranes from the constant assault of free radicals. But the most extraordinary fact is the longevity of the investment. A fruit tree might give you a few decades. A mature hazelnut bush can produce 10 to 25 pounds of nuts per year and remain productive for 40, 50, even 80 years. I'm talking about a bush you plant once, and your grandchildren will still be harvesting from it. It starts yielding in 3 to 4 years, not 15. Over its lifespan, a single bush can quite literally produce 3/4 of a ton, 750 pounds, of clean, storable protein and fat. The traditional use was simple. Gather the nuts as they fall, their husks browning and splitting, and dry them thoroughly in a single layer in a warm, airy place. Once dried, you have a source of bread flour, oil, and sustenance that lasts for a year in the shell. Think of it as the original energy bar, a food designed by the creator to be a perfect long-term storage battery for the human body. And we've replaced it with processed vegetable oils that oxidize before they even hit the shelf. Number 12, Jostaberry, the thornless giant. Sometimes the wisdom of the past comes with a physical barrier. Gooseberries are delicious, with a honeyed tartness that makes incredible pies. But they fight you with a vicious array of thorns that can draw blood through a heavy shirt. Black currants are a superfood, but they were banned in the US for decades due to white pine blister rust, a fact that erased them from the American palate so thoroughly that most people today have never tasted one. The Jostaberry, ribs times nitigrolaria, is the answer. It's a complex hybrid of the black currant, the European gooseberry, and the North American coastal black gooseberry. This isn't a lab-created Frankenstein plant. It's a selective breeding of compatible species, resulting in a completely thornless bush that produces a fruit with the deep, musky, grape-like complexity of a black currant, but 3 times the size. The berries hang in clusters like dark pearls, and when you crush a leaf between your fingers, it releases a surprising fragrance of black currant and spice. The biblical principle here is restoration. What was lost, the taste and medicinal value of the black currant, is returned in a form that is even more resilient and generous. A jostaberry bush is a long-term covenant. Once established, it sits there, a lush green mound reaching 5 to 6 feet tall, and it produces heavily for 20 years or more. We're talking 10 to 15 pounds of berries annually. Berries that are jet black and absolutely loaded with anthocyanins and vitamin C. In fact, black currants, which form half the genetics of this plant, have a vitamin C content that is 4 times higher than oranges by weight. Modern clinical trials have shown that black currant extract can reduce visual fatigue and improve peripheral circulation. The jostaberry takes that medicinal potency and packages it in a sweet, juicy orb you can pop straight into your mouth. The traditional use is to eat them fresh by the handful, or to stew them gently with a touch of honey into a dark, almost black syrup that you can spoon over porridge or stir into hot water for a winter tonic. We forgot about it because the commercial berry industry demands a fruit that is rock hard and red. Bred for shipping, not for nutrition. Think of the jostaberry as the lost tribe of the garden, returning after exile with a message that taste and medicine were never meant to be separated. Number 11, serviceberry, the original pemmican binder. If you look at the history of North America, long before the industrial food grid, the survival of entire nations depended on a small, unassuming tree-like bush. The serviceberry, also known as Juneberry or Saskatoon, Amelanchier ulnifolia, was not just a snack. It was the structural integrity of the most important survival food ever invented. Pemmican. Pemmican was a mixture of dried lean meat, pounded into a fibrous powder, rendered fat, and dried berries. The berries were not just for flavor. The natural pectin and sugars in the serviceberry acted as a preservative, preventing the fat from going rancid over long storage periods. This was a sacred food, a compact, shelf-stable brick that could sustain a person for months on end, providing a perfect balance of protein, fat, and carbohydrates. A man could travel for weeks with nothing but a bag of pemmican and a water skin. Modern science has looked at the serviceberry and found it to be one of the most underrated functional foods on the planet. It contains extremely high levels of fiber, manganese, and riboflavin. But the real standout is the antioxidant profile. The deep purple pigments are powerful phenolic compounds that rival blueberries in their ability to scavenge free radicals. A mature serviceberry bush, which can reach 15 feet with smooth gray bark and delicate white blossoms in early spring, can produce a massive flush of fruit in June. Unlike many other berries, the seeds are so small and soft that you don't notice them. They just melt into the sweet, nutty, almond-tinged flesh. The traditional use was to dry them in the sun until they resembled raisins, dark and wrinkled and intensely sweet. These dried berries were then pounded into cakes with the meat and fat. Here's the direct viewer indictment. We spend billions of dollars on synthetic energy bars that are basically just rice syrup and soy protein isolate. Bars that spike your blood sugar and leave you crashing an hour later. Meanwhile, the serviceberry bush sits in the landscape, offering a genuine, whole food energy source that sustained human beings through the harshest winters of the northern plains. The real question is, why isn't it growing in your front yard right now? Number 10. Lingonberry, the crimson carpet of the forest floor. We often look up for food, searching the branches of tall trees. But what if the most powerful medicine is actually underfoot? The lingonberry, Vaccinium vitis idea, is a tiny, creeping evergreen shrub. Barely 6 to 12 inches tall, that forms a dense mat across the ground. Its leaves are small, glossy, and dark green, shaped like tiny boxwood leaves. And it spreads by underground rhizomes, slowly claiming territory. It prefers the acidic, harsh soils that would starve a fruit tree. the kind of ground where nothing else seems to want to grow. This is the lowly plant that confounds the proud. In the cold northern climates of Scandinavia and Russia, this was the pharmacy of the forest. Unlike the blueberry, which is soft and fragile and bruises if you look at it wrong, the lingonberry is firm, tart, and naturally high in benzoic acid. This natural preservative is the key. Because of that benzoic acid, a jar of lingonberries stirred with a little water, without any sugar or canning, will literally stay fresh in a cold cellar for an entire year. It is self-preserving. You submerge the berries in water, and the benzoic acid inhibits mold and bacteria. Modern science has identified the specific compounds that make this possible, but ancient people simply knew it as a gift. Now, look at the nutritional density. Clinical studies on lingonberries have shown a remarkable ability to modulate blood sugar spikes after a high-carb meal. They slow the absorption of glucose in the gut, flattening the curve. They are also being heavily researched for their impact on urinary tract health, as they contain condensed tannins that prevent bacteria from adhering to the bladder wall. A mature patch of these tiny shrubs produces heavy clusters of bright red berries, but you have to bend low to get them. There is a spiritual humility in harvesting lingonberries. You can't stand proudly and grab them. You have to kneel or crouch or even lie on the ground, your fingers searching through the cool, damp moss. Think of it as nature's insulin whisperer, a lowly, creeping plant that humbles your posture while it heals your body. And we walk right over it looking for bigger, sweeter, less potent fruits. Number 9, aronia berry, the black pearl of the prairie. If you are looking for a gentle, sweet treat, look away. If you are looking for the single most concentrated source of dark polyphenols you can grow in a cold climate, step forward. The Aronia melanocarpa shrub, the black chokeberry, is a native bush that produces clusters of dark, almost black berries with a shocking, mouth-drying astringency. When you bite into one, your entire mouth puckers, your tongue feels dry and leathery. And you might wonder if you've made a terrible mistake. That astringency is not a flaw, it is the taste of medicine. In the same way that the bitter herbs of the Passover were a command to remember, the chokeberry's intensity is a signal of its extraordinary potency. This is not a casual snack, this is a therapeutic intervention. A mature aronia shrub, which might reach 4 to 6 feet with a tidy, upright habit and brilliant red fall foliage, is an absolute production monster. It can yield 15 to 30 pounds of berries annually. That's an enormous harvest from a single bush. But the reason it ranks so highly is the antioxidant level. The oxygen radical absorbance capacity, or ORAC, value of aronia berries is one of the highest ever recorded in any fruit, significantly higher than blueberries, pomegranates, or acai. Modern clinical trials have focused on aronia's ability to lower blood pressure, reduce arterial stiffness, and inhibit the oxidation of LDL cholesterol. It literally protects your vascular system from the inside, keeping the pipes flexible and clean. The traditional use was to mix it with other sweeter berries or honey, or to dry it into a powder to add to stews and breads. It was never meant to be eaten by the bowlful. It was a concentrated colorant and a preservative medicine. A word of honest caution here. If you are on blood pressure medication, you should consult your doctor before consuming large amounts of aronia, because its effects on blood pressure are genuinely potent and could interact with your prescription. We abandoned it because we've been trained to fear bitterness. We've bred our food to be sugar bombs. Think of the aronia berry as the stern, uncompromising doctor in your backyard. A shrub that refuses to lie to you about what real healing tastes like. Number 8, honeyberry, the first harvest of the new year. The long winter is a test of faith. The body craves fresh, living food, the vibrant enzymes and vitamins that come only from a freshly picked fruit. While the fruit trees are still bare sticks, their buds tight and brown, and the strawberry plants are just waking up. There is a bush that produces ripe fruit weeks before anyone else. The honeyberry, Lonicera caerulea, also known as haskep, is the prophet of the growing season. It is a remarkably cold-hardy shrub that can survive temperatures down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Its flowers can withstand a hard spring freeze that would kill a peach blossom. It thrives where peach trees would shatter and die, their sap frozen in the trunk. The biological programming here is fascinating. The honeyberry bush requires very little heat to ripen its fruit. As soon as the day length hits a certain point, the berries begin to swell into elongated, dusty blue shapes that look like stretched blueberries with a slight rectangular form. And the taste is a revelation, a complex mix of wild blueberry, black currant, and a hint of kiwi, with a tangy finish that wakes up your palate. But the nutritional profile is what makes it a genuine superfood. These berries are loaded with anthocyanins, specifically cyanidin 3-glucoside, which modern science has linked to improved night vision and anti-inflammatory responses. But the real ancient wisdom is in the timing. Scurvy and other deficiency diseases were a real threat in historical northern communities after a winter of stored grains and salted meats. The honeyberry arrives precisely when the human body is at its lowest vitamin C and antioxidant reserve. It ripens before strawberries, before cherries, before anything else. Often in late May, when the rest of the garden is still just a promise. The traditional use was to eat them straight off the bush, still cool from the morning air, and to dry the surplus for later. Think of it as the emergency room in your backyard that opens its doors before any other clinic even has power. A bush that understands the urgency of spring renewal better than any modern nutritionist. Number 7, Rosa rugosa, the fortress that feeds, a plant that feeds you as a friend. A plant that feeds you heals your skin and creates an impenetrable defensive wall for your property is a blessing from above. The Rosa rugosa, the beach rose, is a rugged, salt-tolerant shrub with thick, leathery leaves that are deeply veined and wrinkled, hence the name rugosa. Its stems are densely covered in fine, sharp prickles, not just thorns, but a furry armor of needles. And the blooms, oh, the blooms are the most fragrant you will ever encounter, a deep, rich, clove-spiced rose scent that carries on the breeze. But the flowers are just the prelude. After the petals fall, the ovary swells into a massive hip. Some varieties producing hips the size of a cherry tomato, bright red and glossy. These are not the tiny, dry seeds of a florist's rose. These are fleshy, sweet tart fruits that hang on the bush like bright red ornaments well into the winter freeze. Their sugars concentrating with each cold snap. A single mature Rosa rugosa bush can yield 2 to 4 pounds of these hips annually. And they are one of the most concentrated sources of whole food vitamin C on the planet. We're talking about a vitamin C content that can be 20 to 50 times higher than oranges by weight. During World War II, when the British were blockaded and citrus imports were cut off, the government organized the harvesting of rose hips to make a national syrup for children to prevent scurvy. This was modern science, forced to admit the ancient truth that the rose is a pharmacy. The traditional use involves splitting the hips and scraping out the tiny, irritating hairs inside. The fleshy shell can be eaten raw, dried, or stewed into a syrup. The hairs themselves are actually a traditional itching powder, a defense mechanism. But the bush itself is a defense mechanism. Plant a hedge of Rosa rugosa, and no deer, no intruder, and no stray dog is getting through those dense, prickly stems. Think of it as a living wall of vitamin C, a beautiful, fragrant boundary marker that stands guard over your health while it offers you the fruit of its labor. Number 6, blackberry and raspberry, the bramble that refuses to die. We need to talk about the bramble, the rubus family. Often, we look at the blackberry thicket as a nuisance, a wild, thorny mess taking over the fence line, sending its arching canes into the lawn. But what if I told you that this aggressive, unkillable plant is one of the most calorie-efficient and resilient food sources on the planet? This is the weed that kings would envy. The bramble operates on a simple, relentless principle. If a cane tip touches the ground, it roots. If you cut it down, it sends up new shoots. It is a biomass engine that pumps out berries with almost no human input. A single blackberry plant can yield 2 to 3 pounds of fruit annually. And the vertical raspberry canes, planted as bare roots, can give you a harvest within 18 months. The dark color of the blackberry should stop you in your tracks. That deep, inky purple is a bath of cyanidin compounds. Modern science has shown that these specific anthocyanins are highly effective at inhibiting the growth of certain cancer cells in vitro and protecting the endothelial lining of your blood vessels. The fiber content is also extraordinary, specifically the tiny seeds, which provide a unique insoluble fiber that scrubs the digestive tract. The ancient use was straightforward. Eat them fresh until you burst, your fingers stained purple. Then dry the rest into fruit leather, spread thin on a flat rock in the sun. But the real lesson of the bramble is abundance out of chaos. It doesn't need perfect soil pH, it doesn't need pruning charts. It just needs a foothold. It's a reminder that the provision of the land often looks wild and untamed to our modern eyes. But inside that tangled mess is a massive yield of polyphenols. Think of it as nature's guerrilla gardener, a plant that bypasses your careful plans and simply forces food into your hands, demanding you respect its unrefined power. Number 5, blueberry, the acid-loving brain shield. The blueberry is famous now, a darling of the supermarket. But the highbush blueberry you see in the plastic clamshell is a pale shadow of the wild lowbush, or the dense, old heritage bushes. The true blueberry, Vaccinium corymbosum, is a strict disciplinarian. It demands acidic soil, a pH of 4.5 to 5.5. If you try to plant it in sweet, alkaline garden soil, it will sulk, turn yellow, and die. This specificity is not a weakness, it is a filter. The blueberry forces you to amend the soil with peat, with pine needles, with sulfur. It forces you to create a specific environment, and in return, it offers you a food that specifically protects the environment of your brain. A mature blueberry bush, around 5 to 7 years old, is a massive producer, yielding 10 to 20 pounds of fruit per year. That's a staggering amount of food from a single shrub that you can plant right next to your house. But the biblical principle here is the concept of the covenant path. The path is narrow and requires specific conditions, but the reward is life. The blueberries are rich in pterostilbene and anthocyanins, compounds that have been shown in clinical trials to cross the blood-brain barrier. They localize in the hippocampus, the center of memory and learning. Studies on aging adults have demonstrated that regular blueberry consumption can slow cognitive decline and improve motor coordination. The ancient indigenous people of North America didn't have fMRI machines, but they knew these were a sacred gift. They dried them, pounded them into meat, and even used the juice as a cough syrup. Think of the blueberry bush as a maintenance crew for your neural pathways, a shrub that asks you to get the soil right so it can, in turn, get your mind right. Number 4, sea buckthorn, the golden oil of the desert. There is a plant that looks almost alien, a silvery, thorny shrub with clusters of bright orange berries clinging directly to the wood, as if someone glued them onto the bare branches. This is Hippophae rhamnoides, the sea buckthorn, and it is a botanical anomaly. It is one of the only plant foods on the planet to contain the elusive omega-7 fatty acid, palmitoleic acid, in significant quantities. This isn't just a vitamin. This is a structural component of cellular regeneration. In the harsh, windy deserts of the Himalayas and the Gobi, where this plant thrives, it was known as the holy fruit. Genghis Khan's armies reportedly fed the berries to their horses to give them a gleaming, healthy coat and sustained energy. Modern science has excavated the truth behind the legend. The oil extracted from the berry pulp is a potent anti-inflammatory agent, used clinically in Russia and China for treating skin burns, radiation damage, and gastric ulcers. The berry itself contains vitamins A, C, E, and K, but the omega-7 fatty acid is the genuine treasure. This fatty acid signals the body to stop inflammation in the mucous membranes, healing the gut lining and the skin from the inside out. A mature sea buckthorn bush can produce a staggering amount of these berries, and they are wind-pollinated, meaning they don't rely on bees. They fix nitrogen in the soil like the gaume, thriving in poor, sandy ground where fruit trees would starve. The traditional use is to press the juice, which is incredibly tart and oily, or to extract the oil by macerating the pulp in a carrier oil. Think of it as a solar-powered cellular repair kit, a bush that captures the sun's energy and turns it into a liquid bandage for the inside of your body, thriving in the most neglected corner of your property. Number 3, goji berry, the complete protein of the monastery. The goji berry, Lycium barbarum, has been mythologized in the West as a trendy superfood, a powdered additive in overpriced smoothie bowls. But this is a plant with a sacred history. In the ancient monasteries of the Himalayas, the goji was not a trend. It was a pillar of sustenance for those pursuing a life of meditation and fasting. And here is the scientific proof of why. The dried goji berry is 13% protein by weight. It is a complete protein, containing all 9 essential amino acids. This is almost unheard of in a fruit. It also delivers significant amounts of iron, zinc, and B vitamins. For a monk abstaining from meat, or for a modern family looking to rely less on industrial animal agriculture, the goji bush is a silent, generous provider of the building blocks of life. A mature goji bush, which starts producing in its second year and continues for decades, can yield 7 to 10 pounds of fresh berries in a season, reducing to 2 to 3 pounds when dried. That dried weight represents a dense, shelf-stable multivitamin. But the compound that has captured the attention of modern science is zeaxanthin. The goji berry is the richest dietary source of this carotenoid on Earth. Zeaxanthin is the pigment that protects the macula of your retina. It literally shields your eyes from the oxidative damage of blue light. In a world where we stare at screens all day, the goji bush offers a targeted antidote. The traditional use was to eat a small handful of the dried, chewy berries daily. Not a bowl, but a handful. It was a concentrated tonic. Think of it as the original Eternal Youth supplement, a protein-rich, eye-shielding bush that was never meant to be a fad, but a faithful, long-term cornerstone of the home apothecary. Number 2, Malabar spinach, the summer vine that mocks the heat. When the heat of the summer comes, and the true spinach bolts to seed and bitterness, and the lettuce wilts into a sad puddle, there is a vine that laughs at the sun. Malabar spinach, Basella alba, is not a true spinach, but it is a succulent, leafy climber that produces massive, thick, mucilaginous leaves all summer long. The leaves are glossy and heart-shaped, and the stems are a striking burgundy, red on some varieties, twining up any support you give them. The texture is unique, slightly crisp and juicy, and the biology is a direct refutation of the modern agricultural calendar. While we've been taught that greens are a spring and fall crop, this ancient Asian vine proves that the height of summer is actually a time of incredible green abundance. The nutritional profile is robust, high in vitamin A, vitamin C, and folate. But the real value is in the mucilage, that slippery, slightly gel-like texture that appears when you cook it. This is soluble fiber, specifically pectins and polysaccharides. Modern clinical nutrition has shown that this type of viscous fiber is extraordinarily effective at binding to bile acids and cholesterol in the gut, escorting them out of the body. It soothes the digestive tract, acting as a natural demulcent, cooling inflammation in the gut wall. A single trellis of Malabar spinach, a 6-foot by 8-foot frame, can supply a family with fresh, heat-tolerant greens multiple times per week for 3 to 4 months. The traditional use is to pick the leaves and the tender tips, which stimulates even more branching. Think of it as the cooling shade cloth for your internal body. A vertical green wall that turns the oppressive August sun into a harvest of soothing, mucilaginous medicine when every other green has given up. Number 1, Chicago hardy fig, the calorie king. We have arrived at the pinnacle. The number 1 tiny plant that produces more food than a fruit tree is the fig. Specifically the Chicago hardy fig, Ficus carica. This is not a massive, sprawling banyan tree. This is a shrub that you can grow in a cold climate, where winter temperatures plummet to -10 degrees Fahrenheit, and it will still give you a king's ransom in sugar, fiber, and minerals. The fig is the most referenced cultivated fruit in the scripture. Adam and Eve sowed fig leaves. The promised land was described as a land of fig trees. When the prophet Isaiah gave a poultice to heal King Hezekiah's boil, he used a lump of pressed figs. This wasn't a random object lesson. It was a medically active intervention. Modern science has identified the enzyme ficin, which is abundant in the fig latex and fruit. Ficin is a proteolytic enzyme, meaning it digests protein. It literally debrides dead tissue, which is exactly how it healed the king's boil. But the nutritional density is why it tops this list. A fresh fig contains about 74 calories per 100 grams, a healthy, hydrating sugar source. But when dried, the fig transforms. It becomes a dense block of fuel, jumping to 249 calories per 100 grams. This is the original portable provision. A single established Chicago hardy fig bush, which is self-fertile and produces fruit parthenocarpically without needing pollination, can produce 50 to 100 figs per season in a northern climate, and potentially double that in a warmer zone. If the winter kills the top wood, the bush simply sends up new shoots from the roots and sets a crop on that new wood before the fall frost. It refuses to die, and it refuses to skip a harvest. The traditional use was to dry the figs in the sun, pressing them into cakes. These cakes were dense, calorie-rich, and packed with potassium, calcium, and magnesium. They were the energy bars that sustained caravans and armies. The fig tree is a covenant of security. When you sit under your own fig tree, it means you are safe, at peace, and have complete control over your food supply. We have replaced this security with a fragile, just-in-time grocery system. Think of the Chicago hardy fig as the sacred inheritance in your backyard, a bush that connects you directly to the patriarchs, offering you a sweet, sticky, mineral-rich taste of the promised land right through a freezing northern winter. It's not just a plant, it's a promise of resilience,